Welcome. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Balanced Mind, where we look at the deeper inner workings of accounting and bookkeeping and professionals, with your hosts, me, Kim Searle of Emotional Mastery, and Richard Brewin of Progress. We've had a really good start in terms of talking about our podcasts here and what episodes we're going to do, haven't we, Richard?
We certainly have, yeah, plenty of ideas.
Plenty of ideas. And certainly, listeners, if you have any, do reach out and let us know. We're open to any topics that are all about helping you perform better and become better in the way that you need. So, we're going to talk today, and I've mentioned it on several podcasts anyway, about my past as a former project and programs manager. And where planning was really key, as you can imagine. So, today I want to explore the planning within the accountancy and bookkeeping world, and for those of you running your own practices, because actually, there's a lot of expectation around planning. From having written a plan, it's going to happen, but then there's tumbleweed. The fact that you write a plan and you religiously follow it and then it peters out, or you've written a plan and you just haven't considered things that you already know could go wrong. And there may be other things that's come out from our conversation. So please do stay tuned and also be aware that this is one of three, because both Richard and I have come up with, as we were talking, a series of three podcasts that, if you listen to them, will help you not just with the planning, but implementing. So, Richard, planning in the world of accountants, bookkeepers, and the small business owners. That's where we're going, isn't it?
Yeah, and as accountants, it should be ingrained in in us, shouldn't it? It's from day one we're taught plan, control, review, and it should be embedded in everything that we do. And let's
Mm.
face it, it's probably a good approach to life in general. Plan, control, review. But we know that the reality is often a long way different from what the theory is. Sometimes we'll do those three things, but not necessarily in that order. Sometimes we'll try and skip stages because we think we're saving time. Um, a, a mutual friend of ours, a military man, will to paraphrase him, he will always say that the best laid plan rarely will survive the first point of contact with the enemy.
Took the words right out of my mouth. That's
Yeah,
exactly what I was going to say.
yeah, and I think it's one of those things where it's very easy to go, what's the point of the plan? And especially in the world we live in today, with everything that's going on, there's some very glaring examples at the moment of what happens if you don't have a plan, that's for sure.
Yes.
But just because a plan won't survive, because let's face it, a plan is something we do inside our head, isn't it? And then we put it on a piece of paper and we think it looks great, and then we take it to the outside world, and the outside world has a very different view on what's going to happen next.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean to say that that plan was a waste of time in the first place, because it gives us that point. Well, first of all, it means we go in prepared, hopefully, but also it just gives us that point of reference. We've now got something to benchmark against. We've got something to keep on coming back to. I think one of the areas where we probably fail as accountants is that we are pretty good at planning when it comes to the stuff that we do, when it comes to our production and what have you, our projects. Are we as good when it comes to planning around our own businesses, our own performance, our own actions, the more intangible things in our business? Just because something's intangible doesn't say you can't plan it. So it's a massive subject. I think it's a one to get our teeth into.
Oh, yes, it's definitely a massive subject. And I think I concur with everything you've said. And I think it's the same no matter where you are. I mean, even if you're planning for a holiday, there will be key milestones that you're looking to achieve. And I think that's the thing. It's having that end goal, whatever that is. And it could be, and I think I talked briefly about this, in an environment where at the moment we're in early April. So there is a period where I'm not saying it's not busy, but there is a little bit more structure around what's going on before you hit August, September, when you're starting to ramp up work life wise, that you can start to plan for that period of time. I worked years ago in an accounts payable environment, and one of the women I worked for, she was amazing. I'm sure the plans were happening elsewhere, but I only ever saw her planning. And she would do it on paper, like you said. And she'd draw out a calendar month and she'd start at the end of the month where she needed things to be done. And she'd mapped back when other tasks needed to happen to deliver that final task. And I think that was my first introduction to project management, if I'm honest. Structured. I'd always done other things, but it was more admin approach. So it was, yeah, it was really interesting on how that worked. And I think we need to start with the end in mind. I think that's really key. Start with the end in mind. What is it you're trying to achieve? So if you want to finish all your um, accounts 90% by say the end of December, well, what are you going to do about it? If that's your goal, how many have you got? And be as specific as you can to set it out. And then work your way back. And then you'll find out whether it'll work or not.
I think there's actually a step before that, which is I agree with you. From a practical point of view, that's exactly the right approach to take.
Mm,
Yeah, I've talked to accountants for many years about when they're doing their accounts prep, for instance. Don't start from the date when you're going to start it. Start from the date when you plan to finish it,
it
and
is, yeah.
then put all your steps in backwards, and that will give you a start point, a start date. But I think there is a step before that, which is to make sure that everybody understands the value of planning,
Well, that's a good
because
point.
quite
Mm.
often, you talk to lots of managers, for instance, who are responsible for the planning, and they know that they've got to do a plan so that then the job can be started. And that's the mentality they go in with, get the plan done so the job can be started. And of course, that means that you're not thinking about the purpose of the plan. You're not thinking about the end product. You're not thinking about the value, how can we do this better? You're just thinking, I need to get this stage of the job done. It becomes part of the how. Yeah, I need to get this done so we can move on to the proper bit, which is actually doing some hard work. And consequently, it just becomes well, in the old days, just a piece of paper at the front of the file. Now it'll be a piece of digital data at the front of the file. But it's with the planning exercise is something that has to be done properly, doesn't it? Isn't it? Not purely a process that you go through to get to the end. It's got to be, what are we trying to achieve? What is the end game? What are the things that we need to be aware of? Where are the areas that we can make this work really well? Where are the areas that we need to focus on? Where are the areas that don't matter so much? It's a mental approach, isn't it? A plan. It's not a piece of paper that you just fill in as a checklist.
There is that you could make it as complicated as you like, and I've done that, to as simple as you like. And either way, you need to find a midway that really works for you. So I think planning isn't a one and done. You need it's I think you said before we started this podcast, it is a roadmap almost of where you're going. It's like planning your journey to London and going by a train from, I don't know, Edinburgh to London, and then finding you've got to change at some point because there's, like I had at the Easter weekend, there's a replacement bus service. Oh, hello, you weren't expecting that. You had this, this train going to take you all the way, and now you've got to get off and get on a bus, and then you're susceptible to roadworks and, traffic and who knows what else. So I think the second thing to remember, apart from having the end goal, is remember, coming back to your original point of understanding what the plan is for, is to help you highlight things that are going to get in the way, things that are going to stop you, things that you already know, but you've dismissed. I remember we had one of the things we were supposed to do as project managers, and nobody ever had time because nobody valued plans. So I do think that's a topic we could talk about in our next podcast about mindset. So many people don't appreciate project managers or plans because just get on with the job. But they have, coming back to your reference to what's going on in the world today, all I'm going to say is Trump, is that there is no plan. He's very short-term focused, and that's fine, but you don't know where that's taking you. The law of unintended consequences is all I'm going to say. So I think it's really important that you do understand what the value of the plan, and the value of the plan isn't just getting some idea whether A, it can be done, and B, what resources you need, and what it's going to cost, etc. But it's also about having learnt from the past, bringing forward anything you've experienced in the past that got in the way, no matter how small. We called it risks and issues. We actually called it a RAID log, risks, assumptions, because we ignore our assumptions, don't we? We assume our clients are going to get all their stuff in on time. Issues we've talked about, and dependencies. So if you need to meet that end date, who are you dependent on to deliver? And if you can build that into your planning, what you're going to get is a more robust plan because you're starting to plan for eventualities. You already know. You experienced it last year, the year before, the year before. And when you start to do that, you become slicker at the plan that you're developing. So I love what you said about that first port of call. I think you're right. Understanding the value of the plan. The plan is about showing that you're learning and moving forwards, that things aren't going to trip you up like they did before or cause you problems. You're still going to get them, but you can start to plan for them. So there's a plan within a plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's probably where we are weak as a profession, that we don't recognize the different layers of a plan.
Mm,
We and it's partly driven by, I think, largely driven by this obsession we have with the doing bit. Let's get on with the doing bit and get stuff done. Let's get the chargeable hours out there.
yes.
Where's the chargeable hours and the planning? Let's get the work done. But if you go back to the military example, they will start with that high level. What is our prime objective here? What
Yes.
is, and also, what's the secondary objective? If we achieve the prime objective, or if we can't achieve the prime objective, do we have a secondary objective? Do we have a third objective? What's there's different levels of failure, if you like, in
Mm,
this project, or different levels of success. But so they have that top bit, then they'll go, okay, let's look at what are we looking at here? What's the landscape like? What do we anticipate that we're going to be dealing with? What bring it back in-house? What resources have we got available? What resources are we going to need? How can we make those effective when it comes to what we anticipate we're going to be dealing with? And
mm,
bear in mind, it's always about that objective. What could go wrong? Where are our weak points? What have we missed? There's lots and lots of questions that are asked to formulate this plan that comes in. You've got this overall plan, and it comes down almost to like an individual plan for individual soldiers. Like, okay, this is what you will be doing. This is, but it was all stitched together. It's all part of that same
mm,
thing. And I don't think we do that very well. I think we just tend to we want to get into the meat and drink of it far too early. Now, of course, the moment that it goes out there, the enemy weren't sitting around the table. They weren't involved in that discussion. So they play a different game at the moment it starts. But because you've had all of that forethought, you've got that knowledge and that information available. So you can, first of all, you don't lose sight of that prime objective, but also you're more likely to be able to adapt, to be able to say, okay, well, that part's changing, so we need to change
mm,
that bit. And I
yeah.
think we're just not great at that.
Mm,
We miss a real opportunity. If you look at, um, let's take the example of planning for an accounts exercise, for instance. Well, that isn't in isolation, because somewhere else in the firm there will be a resources plan, a staff planner. Somewhere else there'll be other jobs that are going on at the same time that people, and maybe other managers who are planning as well. And then work your way back. At the top of this, we've got a business with where the business leaders have got an ultimate objective, where they've got a 5-year plan, where they've got a 1-year plan, where they've maybe got a plan for the quarter, plan for the month. Are these all stitched together, or are these all working in isolation? Because I think that's where we tend to go wrong. That it's back to my old favorite communication again, isn't it?
mm,
If everyone's not
yeah.
aware of this, so when the managers are planning their work, are they bearing in mind? So, for instance, the firm may have set itself a goal to increase its profitability by 15%. That's our goal for this year. That's our prime target this year. Where's that in the planning of that one job? Where's the consideration for that? Is that factored into it? In 99% of cases, the answer is no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's like that person hasn't got a job to do until I give them this plan. Therefore, I'll do this plan as quick as possible, because that the manager's goal becomes to get that person working, which is totally different to this overall overriding plan of 15% increase in profitability, for instance.
Mm. I hear you. I can't tell you, well, I mentioned actually earlier, but I can't tell you how often, as project managers, we were expected to come up with deadlines, or delivery timelines. Bearing in mind this is going to the client as well. They're involved in the plan because we were dealing with bigger organizations. And we had to come up with them really snappy. And the problem with that is we had to come up with dates that were not validated, but they were held to account straight away. So we may have, I mean, being experienced project managers, we had a good sense and we would always build in some buffer time. So little tip for anybody who is doing planning, please build in buffer time and don't assume you're going to deliver on the date you say you are. And we put that in to cover ourselves because we had no idea all the nuances, and it was crazy, really. But we were not valued because the business, it was in the way of making profit. And while we're not delivering and ordering and checking that what we were ordering was right, we had designs for, telecommunications networks, but we had no idea what was required, but we had to go ahead. So you were doing things on a wing and a prayer. There was never any time, and I think it's not uncommon. So perhaps when we talk about the value of a plan, then this is something that we need to think about, that mindset that the plan is important as a and literally is a roadmap of where you want to go and how you're going to get there, as you've already laid out there. It's really, really important.
And
I
I
remember a
think,
time, sorry,
no,
I was
sorry.
just going to tell a quick story actually about your message of the organizational objective and how that filters down. At the time, I was working as an escalation manager. Sounds grand. It's basically when the client threw all the crap at you and the organization and you had to fix it. And we went up to Staines to one of our service teams to find out why they were causing so many problems for our client. They weren't. Their objective was different to what had come down through the sales side. It was the overall objective was similar, but their interpretation of that objective was very different. So the service guys had to clear the call as quickly as possible, which you get a lot of now. Whereas the sales guys are just trying to pump more and more in without having resolved some of the back end issues. And of course, the client had issues from the moment of sale all the way through. And this was a massive piece of work. This shouldn't have been just down to an escalation manager. They needed an organizational change manager. But that's the other thing to watch out for, is that the organizational objective isn't interpreted by each division department or each person as something that is slightly skewed. So in the end, they don't quite meet or achieve it.
Yeah, yeah. I think again, it highlights that point about everybody understanding the value of planning.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe that everything should be planned. Now, people say, "Oh, well, it's only a 2 minute exercise." In that case, it'll only take 10 seconds to plan it, but it should still be planned. Okay, it doesn't need a formal planning document to do it anymore, but you should still know and understand what. So, what's your plan? I'm going to empty the bins. What's your plan? I mean, it might sound trite, but one of my big failings in life, one of the areas where I always fail to plan is with the bins. The number of times I empty the bin in the kitchen before we've had the evening meal. Yeah. Take it out, chuck it in the dustbin, then come back and go, oh, right. That new bag I've just put in the bin, I've now got to chuck this stuff into. Why didn't you just wait half an hour? That's me failing my plan.
Mm.
It's one of my many failings, but that's me failing the plan. But it's that sort of thing. Everything there should, have we thought about it? I'm a big believer in challenging the intelligence of the team and challenging the intelligence of clients and challenging my own, because I'm not the brightest spark when it comes to this stuff. But if people aren't thinking about it, well, the biggest weakness in the accounting profession is also one of its strengths. Checklists are a strength. They systemize things, they bring organization, they ensure that we approach things in similar manners. But if they become an end in their own right, and people just fill in a checklist and stop thinking. And if we're going to plan something properly, in the same way we're going to review something properly, we need to think about it and understand it. We have an approach with our team, always have had, when they're coming to a point where they're starting to move into management positions, and we're looking for them to do some planning and do some reviewing. We've never said to them, this is how you plan, or this is how you review. We always say to them, this is why you plan, and this is why you review. Now you go away and plan.
So I love
How
that.
how do you think you should approach it? What do you think matters? Let them do that first. Then, of course, there's learning process after that. But in the first instance, we want them thinking about the why
Right.
as
Okay. I get
opposed
you.
to because anyone could give anyone a checklist and go, here, I'll follow that checklist. Yeah.
So
And, and
what?
and we're awash as a profession in doing that. And it
Yeah.
means nothing.
So I love what you've said there, and I think it's brilliant, and it may well tap into a later podcast. But can you just explain why you say a plan is important? I know, but it's better to have it from somebody from the horse's mouth, so to speak, somebody who's in the field.
I think it's you stand the best chance of achieving your objective if you have a plan.
Yeah.
In other words, if you've thought about how you're going to achieve your objective, but also it's how you improve. Yeah, because part of a plan is that question: how do we make this better? How do, what were the problems? How do we make it more efficient? How do we stop that happening? How do we avoid that problem? Yeah, how can we give ourselves the best chance of this being a success? Yeah, again, that's what the military are trying to do. Yeah, how can we minimize the losses? How can we minimize that our chance of being beaten here? Yeah, we can't guarantee it. No plan guarantees anything. But if you've not gone through a that thought process, then if I'm being honest, at best you're probably going to yeah, at best you're going to manage to do what you did last year because that's what everyone's familiar with. And we live in a world now, especially the world, yeah, there's so much change going on. There'll be things that exist this year that didn't exist last year.
Yeah.
Are we
Agree.
thinking about that? Yeah, in the client situation, there'll be things that didn't exist last year. Are we thinking about this? The team members, they've all moved on a year. Yeah, are we recognizing the change that has happened since this project was last planned? Or are we simply going to, because,
Mm.
I've grown up in a profession where it's like, here's your checklist, open last year's file, off you go. That's not a plan.
No.
That's just a gradual deterioration in performance.
I love that. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So here's a couple of things that we didn't always use, but it was encouraged. A SWOT. I know that sounds really bizarre, but like you've just said, if things are changing from last year, your strengths may have got stronger, fabulous, but your weaknesses, checklist, may have got weaker. And it's watching for those. The opportunities, if you're going to make this plan work, what's the opportunities to do something faster, better, whatever? We one of the things that I always found a little difficult to get my head around was this opportunity and threats situation. I don't know, threat that one of your suppliers might suddenly just disappear, opportunities that actually, something comes up where you can start to expand your business or branch out into a new product service line, who knows. They are not things to necessarily give a lot of time to, but just be aware of and maybe keep a separate record of, because you just never know what comes from it. The other one is pest, which will be lesser known. And forgive me because I don't remember it all. It's political, environmental, possibly situational, and something else.
It's
Look
a
it up
new
anyway.
one for me, that is.
Yeah. While we're chatting here, I'll see if I can quickly find it. But that's really, particularly bearing in mind what you said about last year, political would have been a really important one to understand, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, we've talked before, haven't we, about the circles of influence and what you can control and what you can influence and what you can't control. And I think that's very much part of planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there are things that are going on that might impact on our outcome, but actually can't become part of our plan
Mm.
because if we've got a job that we want to get completed in the next 2 months, then there could be Donald could press the button and in 2 months' time it's a bit irrelevant. But actually we can't put that in the plan because it's like, okay, well, it's a worry for us all, but it's not gonna, it kind of influence our plan. But that thing about what do I influence, what can I control? If I look at the education sector, when they're doing it well, spend a huge amount of the time planning. Yeah, you talk to teachers and a 1 hour lesson may take 2, 3 times that to plan.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
we never do that as a profession. Yeah, if you look at if the total time on a project and then look at how much time is allocated to planning, it's tiny in comparison. And the review bit's tiny. It's all about we're obsessed with the doing. Now, fortunately, we're living in a world now where more and more of the doing can be automated.
Yeah.
It's not limited by the speed of humans and the behavior of humans. So actually, what we should be going is great. I've now got more time to plan. I've got more time to review because I've cutting back on my doing time. But even that needs a plan to reduce that doing time in the first place.
Yes.
I think I don't think that we recognize just how intellectual being an accountant can be and should be. Yeah. Yeah. In other words, we don't think enough and we don't encourage others to think enough about what we do.
And if I may say, and I may be completely out of order here, so please, Richard, be Richard, tell me otherwise, but you're trained to think in a certain way, and this ain't it.
No, I mean, there's a whole question there about our education system and training systems, but
Just
I
saying.
agree. Because
And it's not their fault. It's
don't
not
think
their
we
fault.
are. I don't
Yeah.
think we are trained to think. I
No.
think we're trained to do,
Yes.
and
From
that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah. And let me be very clear. I'm being a bit flippant, a bit facetious maybe, but actually it starts from how we educate our children. They are not necessarily taught to think. They are taught to be more rote, learn by rote, repeating, and can you remember? And very rare they assume, or people assume that they learn to think. I remember as a teenager not really knowing how I actually revised and retained information. How
Mm,
valuable would that have been had I known at that time? Show me, allow me to do it, and it'll land. But I had to listen to it, and my auditory skills are strong now, but not for the same thing. Oh my gosh, we could carry on. There was something else you said, but we are going to have a second podcast, which I'll come to in a moment. But PEST, just for those of who want to know, it's political, economic, social. So, having people go on strike, we've got doctors at the moment, but
oh yeah,
and technological analysis. How powerful is that?
yeah.
Now, I am not saying you have to go delve into that in any depth, but at least be aware of these other areas to think about, other things that could influence your project delivery. I think that's really important. Oh, amazing. So what we'd like to do next time, listeners, is talk about, now that planning is important. You know what it is you want to achieve, but it's changing your mindset in terms of being able to being open to learning the planning process and how you can implement it in your way, being able to be open to feedback, and finding out a way that you can stand out and learn from the past, breaking the fixed mentality for you, because the one after that is about future proofing it. So very exciting times. Richard, thank you so much for your time today. It's really been insightful.
Pleasure.
Marvelous. Speak to you all soon. Thank you.
Bye.